Breaking news from Windsor, and it's stirring more questions than answers. What began as a quiet remembrance event has turned into the most talked-about royal appearance of the year. Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, unexpectedly stood in for King Charles and Queen Camilla tonight, and in doing so, they may have just rewritten the palace's unwritten rules. No official statement, no warning, nothing. One senior correspondent said live on air. Then suddenly, there they were, the prince and princess stepping out of that black Range Rover like they owned the moment. Inside Windsor's courtyard, the cameras caught what words couldn't hide. Catherine leaned slightly toward her husband and whispered, "We'll keep it simple. No speeches." William nodded, his voice barely audible over the crowd. "We're just here for them," he said, but his posture, upright and certain, said something else entirely. According to palace aides, this event had been on Charles's personal calendar just days earlier, but late last night, invitations were quietly reissued with a new header, representing their majesties, the Prince and Princess of Wales. The change seemed procedural until the public's reaction hit. Within minutes of their arrival, social media feeds exploded. Hashtags like #WindsorMoment and #NextInLine began trending across Britain. Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. "The King approved it," one aide insisted. Yet another, speaking under condition of anonymity, offered a more telling version. He agreed, yes, but not to the headlines that followed. As the couple moved along the crowd, their exchange carried the weight of a quiet storm. "They seem so natural together," one onlooker told BBC News, eyes glistening. "It felt like watching the future arrive, whether the palace planned it or not." For those inside royal circles, the subtext was impossible to ignore. Charles has always trusted William, an insider close to Clarence House revealed. But this was different. This was William commanding a crowd that used to belong to his father. Even Camilla's absence didn't go unnoticed. Tabloid headlines tomorrow will likely read, "The King's Rest, the Heirs Rise," a neat summary of a complicated reality. Sources close to Buckingham Palace hint that the Queen Consort had advised against cancelling the event altogether, reportedly telling a confidant, "Duty doesn't pause for fatigue." But Charles, said to be under strict medical advice to rest, made what some now call his first symbolic delegation. Still, symbolism cuts both ways. Tonight's images, Catherine bending to hug a child, William clasping the hands of veterans, the two of them framed by the glow of Windsor's lanterns, looked less like a substitution and more like a coronation rehearsal. As one royal historian put it moments ago on ITV, "History's turning points rarely announce themselves, but you can feel when the crown shifts its weight." And somewhere behind the palace gates, the king himself is said to have watched the broadcast in silence. One aide described the moment simply, "He smiled, but it wasn't an easy smile." When the broadcast replayed the next morning, every network slowed down the same 10 seconds. William's subtle nod to Catherine before greeting the crowd. Commentators circled it, dissected it, replayed it again. To most viewers, it looked like reassurance, a simple gesture between husband and wife, but to insiders, it carried undertones of leadership, authority, and unspoken confidence. "That's the moment," one former palace staffer told The Times. "That's when people stopped seeing him as the prince and started seeing him as the king." At Windsor, the atmosphere had been thick with emotion. A cool wind swept through the long walk, rustling the hundreds of floral tributes lining the gates. The crowd's murmur softened the way a church falls silent before a hymn. Cameras flashed as William and Catherine approached, she in a sharply tailored navy coat, he in a simple dark suit. No crowns, no medals, no excess. Just poise and purpose. Eyewitnesses recall the sound of someone shouting, "We love you, Catherine," followed by a ripple of applause. Catherine smiled, responding softly, "We love you too." It was fleeting, but it broke through the solemn mood, a moment that humanized the monarchy in a way few rehearsed gestures ever could. A child handed her a white rose. William leaned over to help her take it, murmuring, "For His Majesty." That simple exchange, personal, respectful, unscripted, became the defining image of the night. Within hours, major tabloids splashed their front pages with headlines like "A Future in Motion" and "The Heirs Step Up." But not everyone was celebrating. Behind Buckingham's curtains, tension reportedly rose. "The optics weren't ideal," one senior courtier admitted. "The king values continuity, but he also guards his authority carefully. He doesn't want the public to misread goodwill as succession." Inside, sources told The Guardian that Charles had expressed quiet frustration over what he called the feverish speculation. Yet he stopped short of reprimanding anyone. "William means well," he reportedly said to a private secretary, "but the world is very quick to crown the next man." Even so, those close to Kensington Palace paint a different picture, one of pragmatism, not ambition. "They're not staging a coup," a close aide insisted. "They're stepping in because someone has to. The king can't be everywhere, and the nation still needs to see its future." That balance between duty and visibility has always been delicate. Since ascending the throne, Charles has preferred smaller, targeted engagements, intimate gatherings over grand spectacles. William and Catherine, by contrast, have leaned toward presence, the power of being seen, of listening, of connecting. Their style isn't about pomp, it's about proximity, and it's winning hearts. The monarchy has to modernize, and the Waleses understand that better than anyone, royal commentator Ciara Morland explained on Sky News. They read the room, they know that authenticity sells better than protocol, but authenticity, for the royals, comes with risk. After the event, clips began circulating of Catherine exchanging a brief, unscripted conversation with a war widow who thanked her for carrying the dignity of the crown. Catherine's reply, "We only try to do what my father-in-law would want," was praised for humility, but passed endlessly for subtext. Some claim she emphasized my father-in-law rather than the king. Others saw nothing more than kindness. But in royal language, every syllable can be a signal. Meanwhile, Camilla's absence lingered like a shadow over the day's success. Reports suggest she had been deeply disappointed to miss the event, but those close to her hinted at something more complex. Camilla understands how quickly narratives form, a longtime friend confided to The Telegraph. She knows that every time Catherine shines, comparisons are inevitable. That's the part the cameras don't capture. The silent balancing act between generations, between tradition and evolution. For every photo of Catherine shaking hands, there's a ripple of unease behind palace doors. "It's not hostility," one aide clarified. "It's gravity. The monarchy is shifting, and everyone feels it." Later that evening, as Windsor's lights dimmed, William and Catherine returned to Kensington Palace. Neighbours described seeing the royal convoy pull in quietly, no fanfare, just the hum of engines and a quick wave from inside the car. According to an insider, the couple spent the rest of the evening reviewing coverage, both grateful and wary. "William doesn't like the noise," the source said. "He knows too well how headlines can twist loyalty into ambition." Yet, for all the caution, the night marked a turning point. The British public, still respectful of their king, saw something new in his son: steadiness, calm, a kind of unspoken readiness. Catherine's composure, William's restraint, their unity under scrutiny, it all played like a preview of the monarchy's next act. And while palace spokespeople continue to insist that His Majesty remains fully in charge, even insiders admit that reality is more nuanced. It's not about abdication, a royal historian told Channel 4 News. It's about adaptation. Charles leads from the mind, William leads from the heart. Together, they might just keep the crown alive for another century. Still, a whisper runs through every newsroom and every corridor of the royal estate tonight. If this was just representation, why did it feel like succession? By the next morning, the question had turned into a national conversation, not just about one event, but about what it symbolized. Was Britain quietly watching the dawn of a dual monarchy? Or was it all just coincidence, a matter of scheduling and sentimentality? Television pundits debated the question as clips of the Windsor appearance played on repeat. "This isn't a rebellion," one commentator on BBC Breakfast argued. "It's evolution. Every monarchy must prepare its future, and this is simply the Waleses preparing theirs." But not everyone agreed. Another guest shot back sharply. Evolution or erosion? Because make no mistake, the moment the heir begins to outshine the king, tradition starts to tremble. Even in Parliament, the ripples could be felt. A senior MP close to the government reportedly remarked that the country needs visible leadership, subtly suggesting that the prince and princess had provided just that. Downing Street, typically cautious about royal affairs, declined to comment, a silence that said more than words ever could. At the same time, public reaction was overwhelmingly emotional. Thousands flooded social media with tributes, admiration, and hope. "Catherine has that Diana quality," one user wrote. "She looks into people's eyes, not past them." Another commented, "William carries his father's dignity but with empathy, like he's walking beside us, not above us." That kind of language makes courtiers nervous. A senior aide told The Independent that the family is grateful for public warmth, but admitted that comparisons are the one thing His Majesty detests most. The aide added that the king is proud of his son's growing a role, but would prefer headlines focused on unity, not succession. Still, unity may be the one thing in shortest supply. Sources close to the royal household described an unusual tension between Clarence House and Kensington Palace communications teams. One insider summarized it bluntly: two offices, one message, and they're not always in sync. In private, William is said to be aware of the optics. He reportedly told a close advisor, "The last thing I want is to make my father feel overshadowed. We're on the same side." Catherine, ever the diplomat, echoed his tone in a private conversation with aides. "We serve the king first, always." Yet even loyalty can't prevent perception, and perception, in royal life, can become prophecy overnight. Observers also noticed something else: how deftly the couple had handled the emotional balance of the evening. William's quiet gestures, the way he clasped hands, made eye contact, even paused to thank volunteers by name, signaled the empathy his generation prizes. Catherine's grace, her patience with the crowd, the way she comforted a crying veteran's widow, all of it radiated authenticity. "It's the kind of presence the monarchy needs," noted royal biographer Simon Dorrington. "It's relatable, but still regal. They make people feel seen." That relatability has become their power. In a time when institutions struggle to maintain trust, William and Catherine seem to embody something refreshingly steady. Yet with that power comes scrutiny. Every outfit, every expression, every unguarded whisper becomes material for speculation. "They're modern royals living in an ancient cage," one palace watcher said on Good Morning Britain. "Every move toward humanity looks like a step toward revolution." Inside the palace, Camilla reportedly watched the broadcast with mixed emotions. A friend told the Mirror that she praised the couple's poise and composure, but couldn't ignore how easily the crowd responded to them. "She knows the feeling," the friend added. "She's seen that kind of adoration before, and she remembers what it did to the last Princess of Wales." Meanwhile, King Charles, sources say, kept his counsel. He spent much of the day at Highgrove, attending to paperwork and private meetings. One aide described him as thoughtful but distant, while another insisted he was content to see the family stepping up. But when pressed, the same aide admitted quietly, he understands that once the public starts imagining the next reign, the current one grows lighter by the day. Still, there's no indication of any direct rift. In fact, later that evening, palace sources confirmed that William had called his father personally after the event. The tone, they say, was warm. He thanked His Majesty for trusting them with the duty, a source told The Telegraph. Charles replied, "You did well, both of you. That's the family's way, a few words, but they mean everything." Even so, the contrast between that private call and the public frenzy around it couldn't be sharper. Across Britain, people are asking what comes next. Will this soft transition, as some insiders call it, continue through the year? Will William take on more of the King's state duties? Or was Windsor simply a one-off, born of necessity and timing? For now, the palace insists it's business as usual, but as headlines shift from remembrance service to rise of the heirs, the narrative may already have slipped out of their hands. Because the truth is, something subtle has changed, not in title or decree, but in perception. And in the House of Windsor, perception has a way of becoming reality faster than anyone dares to admit. By midweek, what began as a single appearance had evolved into a full-blown royal narrative. Morning papers screamed, "The heirs ascend," while talk shows replayed Catherine's every smile in slow motion, searching for meaning. Across breakfast tables and newsrooms, a quiet question hummed. If the king is still reigning, why does it suddenly feel like the country is already looking to his son? At Buckingham, officials tried to steady the message. Statements were drafted, edited, and redrafted again, each one careful to stress continuity and support. One press secretary even told The Guardian, "The king remains fully engaged in state business. The prince and princess simply assisted on this occasion." Yet the reassurance fell flat. As one veteran royal correspondent noted, "The more they explain it, the more it sounds like succession management." Inside palace walls, conversations grew sharper. An aide who had been present during the debrief at Clarence House described the atmosphere as polite but cold. Charles reportedly listened to the television coverage in silence before saying quietly, "It's good they were received warmly." But then, after a pause, added, "It's important we remember who still reigns." The words weren't anger, insiders say. They were a reminder. Elsewhere, Camilla was said to be visibly irritated. "She feels the timing was reckless," a friend confided to the Daily Mail. The king's health is not in crisis, but stories like this make it sound as if he's fading. That undermines him, and, by extension, her. Another courtier, however, offered a different reading. "Camilla knows the public's heart will always beat faster for the next chapter. She's been in this story long enough to know how impossible it is to control the script." And outside those walls, the world moved on, but with sharper eyes. Royal watchers noticed that Kensington Palace's official social accounts had quietly updated their banner images to include more solo photos of William and Catherine at recent engagements. Subtle, perhaps coincidental, but for commentators it was symbolic. "They're defining their own brand," said media analyst Jordan Bishop. "The monarchy's future is being curated in real time, visually, emotionally, strategically." That strategy, it seems, comes naturally to the couple. While Charles favours deliberation, William prefers instinct. "He doesn't overthink optics," said one of his former aides. "He acts, then worries later." Catherine, on the other hand, calculates with quiet precision. Her calm is her weapon. "She's the stabilizer," a palace source explained. "He has the fire, she has the balance." Together, they form the image of steady renewal that Britain craves. It's an image that resonates. Across the country, people have begun referring to them simply as the royals, an unspoken acknowledgement that, for many, they already represent the institution's future. In pubs, offices, even classrooms, the conversation has shifted. One London teacher told ITV, "My students know Catherine's projects better than they know the Prime Minister's policies." That says everything about who really holds public attention. Yet that rising popularity carries risk. Inside palace corridors, senior advisors worry that visibility could mutate into pressure. The king's approval remains strong, but he's facing an image problem, one insider said. He's present, but not prominent. And in a monarchy, absence creates vacuum. A vacuum that William and Catherine now fill effortlessly. Meanwhile, preparations are quietly underway for another high-profile engagement. This time, one the king insists on attending personally. The annual Commonwealth reception at Buckingham Palace will mark his return to public duty after weeks of scaled-back appearances. Courtiers see it as a crucial reassertion of presence. But already speculation swirls. Will the prince and princess accompany him, or will they hold back to avoid overshadowing? For now, the palace maintains silence. Nothing is confirmed, a spokesperson said tersely. But one well-placed source offered a knowing smile. Let's just say every camera in the world will be watching that balcony. And so the stage is set. The king preparing to remind the nation of his reign, the heirs carrying the affection of the people, the queen consort navigating the uneasy middle ground between loyalty and legacy. The monarchy, as ever, balances on ceremony and perception, both fragile, both vital. As dusk settled over London, a royal historian summarized it best on Channel 4. Charles represents duty fulfilled, William and Catherine represent duty evolving. The monarchy has always survived by reinventing itself. The question now is, who decides when that reinvention begins? Because in the House of Windsor, transitions don't happen in proclamations or abdications. They happen in moments. A handshake, a shared glance, a walk through Windsor that changes everything. And the country, knowingly or not, has already taken sides. By Thursday night, the royal storyline had morphed into something larger. A cultural reckoning played out in real time. News anchors spoke of a soft power shift at the heart of the monarchy, while late-night hosts joked that Britain now had a king in office and another in rehearsal. What had been a single act of substitution had become a full-blown conversation about succession, symbolism, and the soul of the crown. Inside palace circles, the temperature was rising. "The king doesn't panic," said one long-serving aide. "But he reads everything. Every headline, every column, every whisper. He knows perception builds pressure, and pressure, left unchecked, turns into narrative." Those closest to him describe a monarch torn between admiration for his son and frustration at the media's hunger for a handover. Behind closed doors, the mood grew heavier still. Charles reportedly summoned senior courtiers for a private discussion at Clarence House, a meeting later described by one participant as measured but firm. According to sources, the king began by acknowledging William's success in Windsor, saying, "They carried themselves with dignity," and the public responded. But his tone then sharpened. "I will not be reduced to a ghost while I am still on the throne." That sentence, according to insiders, landed like a thunderclap. "It wasn't anger," said one witness. "It was clarity. He's drawing a line." Across the city, at Kensington Palace, the Wolseys kept a low profile. Catherine was seen leaving her office at the Royal Foundation, carrying briefing folders as cameras hovered outside. When asked by a reporter if she and William had spoken to the king since the Windsor event, she smiled politely and said only, "We're always in touch." The tone was calm, but the subtext was unmistakable, distance measured in diplomacy. William, meanwhile, was said to be focused on projects, not politics. He reportedly told a close aide, "We're not playing at power. We're helping where we can." Still, even his restraint couldn't stop speculation. Every silence became a headline, every gesture, a signal. One royal reporter on Sky News called it the quietest power play Britain's ever seen. And then came the leak. Late Friday, a well-placed source in Whitehall revealed that the king had recently postponed 2 overseas trips, citing ongoing health monitoring. It was a minor scheduling detail until the timing collided with the Windsor narrative. Within hours, tabloids framed it as proof that the transition had already begun. "The king slows down, the Heirs step up," blared one front page. The palace moved swiftly to deny it. "His Majesty is in excellent health and continues to fulfill his constitutional duties," a spokesperson insisted. But the correction barely made a dent. The story had momentum, And in the media ecosystem that now defines monarchy, momentum is everything. Even allies of the king admit it's a hard tide to fight. "William and Catherine aren't taking the crown," said a senior official. "The public is giving it to them." The numbers back it up. Polling conducted by YouGov that weekend showed a sharp increase in support for the Prince and Princess of Wales, with nearly 70% of respondents saying they viewed them as the face of the modern monarchy. Charles's approval remained steady, but the contrast was glaring. "It's not unpopularity," explained sociologist Emily Grant on BBC Radio 4. "It's generational inevitability. People are emotionally investing in the future, not the present." That shift is something the monarchy has faced before, under Elizabeth and Diana, under Diana and Charles, and now again, under Charles and Catherine. History repeating, but refined through softer tones and digital speed. This time, the rivalry isn't shouted, it's whispered. A reshaping of power without rebellion, of reverence without resistance. Even Camilla, whose instincts for media moods are said to be razor-sharp, reportedly sensed the pattern. She told a friend, one columnist revealed, that she feels like she's watching a familiar storm forming, one she hoped would never come again. And yet, there are signs that the king isn't bowing to pressure. His upcoming Commonwealth reception is being restructured into a major public moment, complete with a televised address emphasizing duty, unity, and continuity. Aides hint that the tone will be firm, an elegant assertion of presence. One courtier said the speech is designed to remind Britain who still signs the documents, who still wears the crown. Still, even among loyalists, uncertainty lingers. "You can't turn back emotion," said a historian interviewed on ITV. "Once people start imagining the next reign, the current one becomes the prelude." As the weekend approaches, the royal family stands poised between tradition and transformation, the king guarding his reign, his heirs embodying its evolution. The House of Windsor, ever composed, is quietly trembling. And across Britain, a question echoes with growing urgency. When the public's heart has already moved on, how long can the crown stay still? By Sunday night, Britain was caught between reverence and restlessness. The king's portrait still adorned government walls, yet it was William and Catherine's faces, smiling, composed, magnetic, that dominated the nation's screens. The couple hadn't made another public appearance since Windsor, but the silence only deepened the fascination. Morning papers framed it with surgical precision. The Sunday Times called it a family at a crossroads, while the Mirror went bolder, a throne in waiting and a king watching. One editor admitted candidly, "The monarchy isn't just being reported anymore, it's being serialized. Each week feels like a new episode, and no one dares to miss the next one." Inside Buckingham Palace, the tone was more restrained. The king's schedule, pared back for reflection and recovery, was being quietly managed by senior aides. "He's conserving energy, not surrendering ground," one courtier explained. Still, the mood was shifting. Around the palace, whispers grew of the Windsor effect, the sudden swell of affection and expectancy directed toward the next generation. At Highgrove, over a discreet weekend lunch, Charles reportedly convened a small gathering, Queen Camilla, Princess Anne, and 2 trusted advisors. "It wasn't confrontation," said a source familiar with the meeting, "but a reckoning. The king wanted to know, how do we reclaim the narrative before it redefines us?" Anne, blunt as ever, reportedly replied, "You don't chase the story, you outwork it. Let William take the crowds, but don't let the cameras forget the crown." Her words, witnesses say, landed with the same quiet weight as truth often does in royal rooms. Meanwhile, in Norfolk, William and Catherine were seen at a village shop, relaxed, smiling, pushing a trolley of groceries. A photo leaked to social media within hours. "They look so normal," one local wrote. "And that's exactly why we love them." That single sentence summed up the new monarchy in motion. duty wrapped in relatability. But for the institution itself, relatability cuts both ways. They make the monarchy human, said one royal historian, but that humanity risks overshadowing hierarchy. You can't modernize without loosening control, and control is the one thing a monarchy can't afford to lose. Foreign headlines echoed the same theme. The New York Times described Britain's parallel monarchies. France's Le Monde coined the phrase La transition silencieuse, the silent transition. The world was watching Britain reinvent its royal family without ceremony, decree, or announcement, just through emotion. Catherine's role in this transformation cannot be overstated. She's mastered the balance, said a close family friend. She speaks softly, but the world listens. That's her strength, quiet power, disguised as grace. Yet with admiration comes scrutiny. Insiders say she's painfully aware of the parallels drawn between her and her late mother-in-law. She doesn't chase Diana's shadow, the friend added. She walks through it. William, too, senses the volatility. His private secretary reportedly warned staff this week. Every compliment has consequences. Every cheer risks misinterpretation. The phrase spread through palace corridors like prophecy. That evening, BBC's Panorama aired The Heir Apparent, The Making of a Modern King. The documentary traced William's transformation from boy prince to global statesman, intercut with archival clips of Charles as a young idealist struggling to be understood. The contrast was haunting. It's not rivalry, the narrator concluded. It's rhythm, the old reign softening, the new one rising. At Buckingham, aides watched in silence. When it ended, Charles reportedly spoke only once. Relevance is earned, and it never comes free. His tone, say those present, was calm, but laced with the weary wisdom of a man who knows what tides feel like. Because that's the truth buried beneath the ceremony. Crowns are worn by law, but sustained by faith. And right now, public faith is shifting, gently, but unmistakably, toward Windsor's next chapter. Still, the palace insists nothing has changed. His Majesty reigns in full command and grace. Read a new statement released late Sunday. But as one royal analyst noted dryly on Sky News, command is official, momentum is emotional, and momentum has already moved. Which leaves Britain on the edge of something new, not a crisis, but a quiet recalibration of loyalty. The king remains the monarch in title, the prince and princess, the monarchs in motion. And between them lies the delicate heartbeat of a dynasty learning, once again, how to survive time itself. But if this is only the beginning of a larger transition, one that blends reverence with reform, hierarchy with humanity, then the real question is, who will define what comes next? Will Charles reassert his crown? Or will William and Catherine's modern monarchy quietly take root before anyone dares to name it?